November 16th, 2009. It's on or about 7:30 p.m. This evening, City Council is meeting in regular session. We do have a quorum with all members of council present. The next item on our agenda is the disposition of minutes from the regular session held November 2nd, 2009. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes have been accepted. Under communications, Member Sands.
Excuse me, I would like to move that we accept the auditor's reports for the month of October.
Motion and a second. Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The auditor's reports have been accepted. I do have two notices of public hearing I'd like to announce. One is going to be Monday at 7 p.m., December 7th, and this one is to consider a recommendation from the Planning Commission to amend the Athens City Zoning Code, permitted use, to remove gardening and domestic animals as conditionally permitted uses, and to add gardening, domestic animals, etc., as permitted accessory uses. And the other one is on Monday, December 7th, 2009 at 7 p.m. Those will be about the same time, won't they? This one is to discuss the Ohio Rural Intercity Bus Program. So anyone wishing to attend those two public hearings, please be advised, and the Clerk of Council does have further information on any of them. Member Fall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to briefly say thank you to the Athens County Health Department for all the work that they have been doing with the H1N1 vaccination program. I know that they've been going out into schools and they've been doing a lot of clinics. I think that they're kind of unsung heroes right now, and I just wanted to say thank you. I've had lots of comments from parents from the vaccination program in the school, specifically East, that have really commented on being very grateful for the program that they've been doing. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Very good. Are there any other communications council members wish to share? Any communications from the administration?
Well, as you said, there will be the public hearing the 7th, December 7th. We'll also bring up the change in bus fare as well. We'll be adding that to the mix. We already did that actually in August, and again, timing is that it will be mostly, at a quiet time of the year, but the fares will be changing quite soon. As I say, we plan to have that an increase in January. The regular fare will be going from $1 to $1.50. The other ones will be increasing a certain percentage as well. But I just wanted to let you guys know. And I think there was a press release that was put out earlier today about closing some of East State Street between May and Hudson Avenue. It probably will be in the paper tomorrow, but it's starting tomorrow the 17th to the 18th, depending on weather. Basically, a sewer excavation in that area. So just so everybody knows that's going on.
Was that your report and other communications also? Or?
Oh, is that what you want? I thought that's what you were asking me. What were you asking me
Very
then?
good. Well, that was what I was asking you, Mayor Weil. Reports or communications from the city auditor?
No report.
Okay. Law Director Patrick Lang.
Thank you, Mr. President. A few weeks ago, I was having a kind of a personal, private conversation with a member of this council, and it had just come up in the conversation, about how how you're enjoying the job of law director. And I said, well, I love being law director. There's really a lot of things I enjoy about the job, but I got to be honest. I said, if there's one thing that it's tough sometimes to sit in meetings when certain policies or issues come up, and I kind of have to bite my tongue a little bit. And having been a member of council before. Of course, I could say anything that I felt or thought about a certain issue, but as law director, it's a different job. It's a job that includes prosecuting criminals on one hand, but also as it pertains to the council, I'm an advisor to city officials, and my job is to protect and kind of defend the city's policies, whether or not I would agree with that policy in a given instance or not. And so keeping all of those things in mind, I would like to speak briefly this evening about an issue that was on the front page of the Sunday paper this week, and that is the issue of some cameras that have been installed by the city on Court Street and in uptown areas, which are apparently keeping public areas under surveillance at all times. Now, I'll be very upfront about this. I do have personal beliefs, personal feelings about this issue, going back to when I was a student here at OU. I studied issues of public surveillance, and as a student in law school, actually took extra voluntary coursework on the First and the Fourth Amendments to the Constitution. And what really drew me to those amendments in particular is that both set a high bar for government action. In the case of the First Amendment, if government is going to regulate somebody's speech, or in the case of the Fourth Amendment, if government is going to kind of look into the affairs of the people, the government needs to have a really good reason for doing that. And so, I'm not going to get too much into, the political philosophy of all this. There have certainly been people with much more, much more wisdom than myself out there who have talked about, this idea, kind of the incongruous or the incompatible sometimes goals of government, and having to protect the security of the people on one hand, while having to ensure the people's liberty on the other hand. And so I'm really not, I don't want to get into that too much here, and I do want to try to keep this in perspective. I realize that we're not talking about Guantanamo Bay, or we're not talking about warrantless wiretaps here. But I will say that I think that there are, I know that there are intelligent and thoughtful people out there who have strong feelings about this issue of government surveillance in the public square. And I think that given that fact, that it is, no matter how well-intentioned the surveillance may be, and clearly that is the case here, that being the case, I do believe that it is an issue that does deserve a public debate. And so, kind of putting my law director hat back on, I will say that these cameras clearly are legal, and I think that it's quite clear that the mayor has acted with the very best of intentions, that he's trying to make the city safer, and I think that the mayor needs to be applauded for those efforts, as does the Athens Police Department. They do a fantastic job. However, again, I think that this is also clearly an area of city policy. And as such, it is clearly under City Council's jurisdiction to address, should it choose to do so. And I guess that is my respectful request this evening, is that Council would give this issue a full public hearing. Thank you.
Other comments on the law director's comments? Member Gosney.
Thank you, Law Director Lang. I didn't know this was going to be discussed tonight, but personally, I think we should have some sort of public hearings on this. I just want to be clear that City Council has not made any decisions that would allow the cameras to be put up, or to sanction that, I guess, not to allow them, but to sanction it. So we haven't seen that before Council yet. So hopefully we can have a public discussion going forward.
Are there any other comments from Council?
Just
Member Sands.
I was asked at one point about the cameras, and the question was prompted by the article in the paper, and my answer was that City Council had not discussed it, and the person I spoke to was surprised that we had not discussed it.
To be fair, the law director called me today to test my institutional knowledge on did we discuss it, and I struggled with that during our conversation. Did we authorize the grant to get the money? Because these are pretty much grant paid. And it runs in my mind we did, but I would not swear to that. I'm not sure. But other comments from Council first. Yes, Member Fall.
I think at one point we discussed about the police making the cameras for the garage, and that's all I remember about this, is that the garage was specifically discussed, and how somebody can make the camera system, and that it was going to be a great deal because they could do it in-house. That's what I remember.
Okay. Are there any other comments? I would, in just a moment, and I'll come to you. I would anticipate that probably the best way to have the public discussion begin, and I sense from Council that we would like that would be under the Committee of the Whole, and that we will add that to the agenda the next time the Committee of the Whole can meet. Is that okay with everyone? Mayor Weil.
Yeah, I know we did bring up at one point the cameras in the parking garage. I think this is not really part of that original grant, but I think it's been expanding over time. We did have to replace the cameras are dying around the law administration building, so there was an addition on that. The camera that's on the corner on the intersection of Washington and Court died quite a few years ago. It used to be actually a webcam that we had available. I think the police kind of commandeered that one a while back for view purposes. Again, what I stated in the newspaper article is essentially it augments our police force from my point of view. It really does not do much more than that in terms of just more eyes to see things. And you have to be there. Worst case scenario is that if something happens, they can re-roll it. In some cases, in other cases, it's a live feed and doesn't get recorded. We used it during Halloween and kind of explored the possibilities there. In one sense, it's interesting because it gives you, a great view. In another sense, it doesn't give you everything that's there. There's a difference between watching, as you know, TV and being real alive there. So, as I say, I looked at it as an extension of the ability of the police to do their job. And I don't see it as a big issue. I know there's people who are concerned about it, but it's not like it is. The other extreme, of course, is which I brought up to the reporter who asked me, is I've been getting emails and letters from Redflex, I think is the company. These are the companies that will come in here for nothing and just what you say, and they'll come in and put cameras on the intersections and write you tickets when you go through a yellow light or speed or anything like that. I also received from the police chief a Columbus Dispatch, I guess, where the towns of Chillicothe and Heath have both voted these cameras down. Essentially, the argument this company comes in is that it will make it safer. There'll be less people running lights if they get tickets, and you have this on, going all the time. They'll send you a little picture of you going through the light and a ticket. There's a safety factor in there, but there's also what's perceived as an enforcement and infringement on people's rights. I don't know. I think the city of Marion was also going to bring this to the ballot. I do not know which way the vote went on that. But as I say, 2 cities have at this point revoked those cameras. So you have that degree of surveillance and enforcement. You have the voyeur part of it right now, which we have, I guess, since there's no enforcement aspect of it. And then you have no surveillance whatsoever. I look at this as a median, from my point of view, and as I say, an assistance to the police to see what's going on. I was kind of surprised in the paper when they talked about actually having the ability to tap into Palmer Place. I thought that's new and different for me. So I understand the public aspect of it. I'm not sure about the private aspect of it.
As a recipient of one of those tickets from the corner of Carnegie Avenue and 136th Street in Cleveland, Ohio, that cost $110, we may need to look at that as a
it does change
budget
behavior.
balancing method, but yeah, it does change your view about that real quick. In the interest of full disclosure, the government channel operated a webcam out of our cupola up here for a long time that Channel 3, when you were watching the weather in the morning, would tap into, and you would see if it was snowing in front of the courthouse or not. I don't. Is that still going on?
No, it doesn't function anymore. In fact, that's the one they moved to the intersection at Washington and Court for a while until it died. And actually, in terms of my interest, I wouldn't mind if we sometime have some tourism money to actually reestablish some of those webcams. I think as a tourism aspect, it's very good. I mean, I know there's people who actually, shoot. There's only about 3 in the city right now that I know of. One is at the Monument from OU. I think one's looking at the airport. It used to at the airport in Albany, which was a very boring scene. And I think the one at Scalia Labs, which just looked out over Clippinger someplace. But at the same time, I know there's a whole swath of people who like to go check out the weather someplace or see their old town and see what's cooking. So therefore, from my point of view, if we ever have the wherewithal and the technology and the money, I would not mind doing that. If you remember during the widening of East State Street, the camera used to take pictures of the traffic congestion while we were doing that from their old rec building, I believe it was. And again, that had a useful function in terms of, do I really want to get involved in that? Not that anybody really could, by the time they jumped in their car and got there, it'd probably change again. But again, this is the thing. We have the ability. You look at Palmer Place Palmer Place, Spring Palmer Fest last year, where we had lots of cameras rolling on that. In fact, if you look at it, you see there's a regular glow of all the cell phone cameras that are just blinking away. So, that's the type of world we live in right now.
I think it does show that we should have this discussion, and thanks for bringing it up. Okay, on to ordinances for third reading. Is there anything else?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. Ordinance 12709, an ordinance amending the 2009 appropriation ordinance. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 12709.
Second.
This ordinance authorizes two payments. One is $30,000 to the street rehab fund, money that will be reimbursed. This is for the new road from Holzer Clinic to the businesses that parallels East State Street. That project is funded by the Holzer Clinic. However, there probably will be some cost overruns that the city will need to invest some money in, and then we will be repaid for those. And the second part of this is $30,000 to the water fund for construction contingency on the Curtis Mulligan project. That project is being funded by grant, but as with all of our contracts, we need a contingency for unforeseen actions that are necessary, and the grant did not allow for that contingency, so we're asking for it now.
Is there further discussion on ordinance 127? All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 13209 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an LPA federal project agreement with the state of Ohio through the Director of Transportation for rehabilitation of the Richland 682 intersection and the Richland Avenue Bridge, project number 230. Member Ninesley.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 13209.
Second?
And this is for the intersection of 682 and Richland that will help us with the project for the roundabout construction that's to begin in March of this coming year, and also the redecking of the bridge that will follow the construction of the roundabout.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 132?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 13309 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and declaring an emergency. Again, Member Nisley.
Mr. President, I move adoption of 13309.
Second.
And as discussed at our committee meetings, this ordinance will try for this year, for 2009, suspending the parking at the metered spaces in the garage, and that will be from the Friday after Thanksgiving until midnight on December 31st of 2009.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 133?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 13409 is an ordinance authorizing preliminary engineering of the Richland South Project number 244. Again, Member Nisley.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 13409.
Second.
And this is for the preliminary engineering work for a project that will occur on a portion of Richland Avenue that is below the roundabout, the Richland 682, and it will begin at Dairy Lane and extend down Richland Avenue to what we refer to locally as the South Y, the intersection of the old Pomeroy Road and 33 and 50. And we'll be looking at improvements along the road for curb, access management, and other improvements, possibly lighting.
Is there further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance number 134?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. On to ordinances for second reading. Ordinance 13609 is an ordinance granting renewal of a revocable license to Deborah Daniels, owner of 39 Hooper Street, for use of the city right-of-way for a fence. Ordinance 13709 is an ordinance amending the Athens City Code Title 23 Zoning Code, Chapter 23.04, Permitted Uses in B3 General Business Zone. Ordinance 13809 is an ordinance authorizing the replacement of defective water meters. Ordinance 13909 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a grant application and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to provide services for the Ohio Rural Intercity Bus Program and declaring an emergency. Ordinance 14009 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit a grant application for American Recovery and Reinvestment, ARRA funding, through the U.S. Department of Energy, okay, and declaring an emergency. Member Gosney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to move that we consider Ordinance 14009 under suspension.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that there's the expedited timeline of stimulus funding and the calls for grant applications. There's a letter of intent due November 19th, which is 3 days from now, and the full application is due on the 14th of December.
Motion and a second. Further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspending the rules on Ordinance 140?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would allow the mayor to enter a grant application for some federal stimulus money.
Move adoption.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I move adoption of Ordinance 14009.
Second.
Get a little bit ahead of myself sometimes.
No problem.
This ordinance would allow the mayor to submit a grant application to the U.S. Department of Energy to fund a municipal energy program that would make it easier for residents and other city property owners to do solar energy projects. And also there's going to be some energy efficiency component to that. And a lot of the details are still being worked out, even though the deadline is coming very quickly, but we did hire an outside company, Renewable Funding, to help with the grant application itself and also with some of the framework of the program. They're experts in the field, and they will definitely help us put a more competitive application together if we approve this ordinance.
Further discussion on adoption of 140. All those in favor of adoption of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 14109 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit grant applications for American Recovery and Reinvestment funding through the Ohio Department of Development for energy efficiency improvements and declaring an emergency. Again, Member Gosney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we consider Ordinance 14109 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
And it's the same reason as the previous ordinance that we considered. The deadline for this grant application, this is through the Ohio Department of Development, the deadline is November 30th for this application.
Further discussion on suspension only? All those in favor of suspending the rules on Ordinance 141?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules have been suspended.
I move adoption of Ordinance 14109.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would allow the city to enter into applications for energy efficiency improvements for funding that is stimulus funding going through the State of Ohio Department of Development. We've discussed a couple different options, and the administration is still working on the details of what we will end up applying for. One of them is dealing with I&I. Mayor, you're going to have to help me out. Influx and infiltration?
Yeah, infusion, influx and infiltration will do. Basically what this is, what?
Inflow.
Inflow, sorry.
Thank you.
Essentially, this is for energy projects, and one of the allowed programs is to actually eliminate I&I in terms of it saves energy if you don't have to process all the wastewater or stormwater that gets through. I know this was discussed a couple of years ago. It's one of the projects we're talking about we're discussing the wastewater treatment plant energy efficiency side of that, as well as the water treatment plant. You'll see it says Armory, but the Armory has pretty much dropped out of the running because of time constraints. We're going to concentrate on some of the more acute needs. And again, it's just a shot at the grant and see if we can get some money to start fixing things.
And there's no cost match requirement for these grants, so it's very
I
important.
think
to
the
point out.
minimum is $150,000 to start with.
Yeah.
So anything we can do with that.
Other comments? Member Bain?
So how will you decide if you're going to do I&I, which we don't have plans for, which might be a STEM project next year if we're still, versus the plant?
Right now, the priority is the plant first, because we have some of the Burgess-Snipel numbers together. We also have some of the, we had discussions with Perfection about whether we could borrow some of their information in terms of what energy efficiencies. Remember, we entered into the possibility of getting a grant for the House Bill 420. They look at it and say the turnaround will be too hard to do that. We'll probably get a place setter in for the wastewater treatment plant and then try the water plant. Further down is the I&I. It's kind of one of these things that came through. I think it was first, the application was first put out October 17th, I think. So it's been barely a month open and closed for this. A little bit more than a month open and closed in terms of a grant application.
Well, the reason why I was asking is that I wrote an email to Andy a day or so ago asking him if we could do what Ironton did. And he had 3 different places he was planning to use the liners on the lines from the 1983 study that was never implemented when we did.
I wasn't included in that email.
Well, I know, because I was going to bring it up next week when we had our meeting, because that's my week to talk.
Well,
But I just wondered about I&I at this point under the circumstances when we have that looming cost of the other. I mean, the I&I has been there since 1983,
Yes.
and nobody did anything about it, or very little about it, whereas the wastewater plant, we are under pressure. So I'm glad that you have that. And I really wish that we had more time to discuss these things, but, it's sort of like the camera, except my trigger points aren't necessarily the camera, because I don't necessarily worry that much about it, but I worry about this stuff. So, forgive me for pressing you on that, because it's not, it's more my concern than the camera. So,
I understand.
okay, good. I'm glad you understand.
Yeah, again, these are a lot, what we're going to see in the next couple of years is a lot of the big fixes are going to have a grant component in it. And the way the stimulus package has been running and all, the ARR, as they say, A is ARA is, they're rushing to get this stuff in, and then they take their time about putting it through. I have talked to Andy a little bit about it. I told him to actually review what Nick Carr put together, because a lot of the placeholders that we put in earlier this year for some of the projects will do just as well. But we need to review those, because, again, it's one of those cases where he's got 3 projects he's juggling right now, as you know. And it's a case of where we can see if we can put this in and see what happens.
Yeah, some of those were pretty bogus.
Oh, I'm aware of that, but as a
Well, I just wanted to
placeholder,
make sure we,
realize we didn't do that and look at that as energy. We looked at that as fixing infrastructure, and that's a kind of a shift in terms of emphasis. But as you know, if you improve something, buy a new refrigerator, it's got to be more energy efficient than a 20-year-old one you got. So anything we do will be improvement in energy efficiency and
okay,
cost.
as long as we have you,
There's the spin we need.
1 minute, 1 second, 1
Well,
second.
no,
here.
I mean, you know that.
But also then, and I meant to ask this before, and these words have come out of my mouth earlier. I hope that in both cases, there is no added expense for a city that's already strapped with its personnel. I mean, you're out there covering for Tanya while she takes a break, and answering the phone. Now, that's walking around excellence, but I don't think that we can continue. I mean, I think that it's all well and good to have these big plans, but we had better make sure we have our basics covered first.
Answering the front desk is because I'm walking by.
Okay, well, I said walking around excellence, it was my turn.
Well, okay, I can just walk right past
No, I just want to make
somebody
sure that out
and ignore
there...
Back to ordinance 14109.
Well, it is 14109. The question is, do we know enough to really vote on this? And I guess we'll go along with it, because the mayor has told us what he's going to do. But this is just another permutation of what you guys consider a problem with the cameras. My problems are a different set.
We can always refuse.
Deal with it.
Are there other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 14109?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 14209 is an ordinance levying special assessments for sidewalk improvements associated with the Carpenter Street project and declaring an emergency. Now, Mayor
I see
Weil.
on my notation, it says next time suspend rules, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay.
Maybe.
just- I know you wanted to get some of this stuff over and done, with, that's fine.
Which I guess means maybe not.
And actually, the time has already been set. We're in good shape.
Okay, no problem.
Now on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 14309 is an ordinance amending the 2009 appropriation ordinance. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that we consider ordinance 14309 under suspension of the rules.
Second?
This ordinance has, if you've looked at it, it has several items here with payments that are due by the end of the year, some of which will take a little time to process, and so we'd like to get this passed as soon as possible.
Okay. Further discussion on suspension only? All those in favor of suspending the rules on ordinance 14309?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 14309.
Second.
We haven't discussed this yet, but there are several issues covered in this one ordinance. The appropriations, the first is $7,300 to the general fund to cover jail costs through the end of the year. $28,000 to the general fund, again, from lands and buildings to cover the cost of street lighting. Again, we hope till the end of the year. $1,000 to parking enforcement for replacement of defective parking meters. $32,900 and some dollars to the Transportation Assistance Fund for our bus contracts. We received some money and we have to pay it back out. We have an appropriation of some money that's been donated to the city by the Chamber of Commerce and the Athens Uptown Business Association, $14,900 and some dollars for benches, trees, tree fencing, and grates in the Uptown area. $8,600 to the Internal Service Fund for the renewal of iPrism. iPrism is an internet security system for our internet system that we have in the city. Section 2 is moving some funds in the law director's office, transaction class 100, and moving it to, transaction class 300, moving it to 100, which is personnel line to allow the law director to hire an intern to help with end-of-the-year items. Again, this would run just through the end of the year. Mayor?
Just to add some of the information there, the iPrism software does track the use of the internet, and it's a security, not similar to a firewall, but a monitor. This is for actually a 4-year contract.
Okay.
And actually it's for a 3-year, and if you do it this year, you get a bonus year. Last time we did this, we actually pulled all the money from about 20 different funds from the telephone line, from what I could check. Went back trying to figure out how we did this last time, 3 years ago. So we were covering 2007, 8, and 9. The Uptown donations were about, I think about 9,000 that came from the Chamber, about 5,000 and change, or 4,000 change came from the Uptown Business Association as donations. I fully expect some more donations coming as soon as we get the gates, the benches and the grates and the cages and trees planted. Again, this is planting season, which is why we want to get that done. The lakefront, we'll probably need to actually encumber more money, appropriate more money eventually for that too. We're waiting for a check for our first bus as a reimbursement, so we will probably have to revisit that just to be able to pay off all of this year's bills for McDonald's. We probably are in the midst of doing another contract with, we're starting up another contract cycle with McDonald's for our transportation. It will probably be a hair bit lower because of the reduced hours we're operating for Courtyard, just so you know, as well as the increased fares. And that's really all I'm going to cover, since obviously I could bore you with the rest, I guess.
Thank you.
Further comments on ordinance 143? Member Bain.
So the only real impact on the carryover is going to be the streetlights, or is there any other place where the carryover is going to be affected? Because we're taking from the unappropriated balance, just to make, so everyone understands that our money is going a bit here and there.
Well, probably the jail cost
Yeah,
as well.
35,000 then, are we talking about? Roughly 28 for the streets, lights, and
Approximately, yeah.
7? I mean, that's money that, the carryover money.
Well, again, the renewal of the contract with iPrism will be taking some money out, but that's something that could be, it's going to be spread, we won't see that for another
I don't
3,
think
4 years.
it isn't as bad as it could be. It's not $60,000.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 143?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Ordinance 14409 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with the Soil and Water Conservation District. Member Gosney.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a yearly renewal with the Athens County Soil and Water Conservation District. They do education. They also provide data on soil quality and stability and water as well. And the mayor, I assume, has some to add here.
Oh, well, I could, but essentially this is a free service for anybody who has interest in what the lay of the land is, if they're doing some kind of excavation within the city and they want some expertise. As I say, it's free information. They'll come out, check your soil. If they think that more needs to be done, you'll probably have to hire somebody, but for a fast, and considering where we are in slip-prone Athens, Ohio, it's not a bad service. And in terms of education, it's a useful function, I think.
Is it still around the 12,000 mark? I didn't look.
As far as I know, it hasn't changed. Yes, 12,000, but it hasn't changed in years.
Yeah, okay.
And also, just to add to that, I'm trying to get them to a committee meeting before our final vote, so we'll be able to hear directly from them.
Other comments? Ordinance 14509 is an ordinance amending the fringe benefits package for non-union personnel within the city of Athens and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee. Member Sands, I guess you will be speaking to this? Member Bain looks like she may be speaking to us.
Okay.
Nobody wants to.
No, it isn't that I don't want to speak. We had quite a lengthy discussion about this last time, and the only group that has not gotten a salary increase is the non-union group, and we do rely on them thoroughly for the functioning of the city, particularly the safety forces, where the command line is really here, and down to the people giving out traffic tickets and everything else. And we gave a $1,000 lump sum, not we, but the city did, last year from the 1st of July to the 30th of June, and then they've been without funding increases. So what we proposed last time, using funds that we have, general funds that are not necessarily currently in the general funds, but will be transferred over there, general fund designated funds. We're going to, on top of the existing step increases, give a 2% increase. We have this midpoint thing that we have in the current personnel ordinance, and maybe it will be revised later on, but it's very similar to what OU has. And at that midpoint, you have people getting no increases, but unless we designate money for those increases. And we put 3% there, and then 1% for people that are topped out. Now, we have a very strange system in the city, in the sense that we have something called longevity, which is added to the top, and that's why the people at the highest level are getting the lowest increases directly, and they have the longevity piece. We do have to, I think, fairly quickly get someone to come and look at this to try and straighten out the disparities between longevity and non-longevity people. But I think that we've started down the path a bit here. One of the things we did is we're using the 1st of January 2010 as the anniversary date. That sort of makes it all simpler than it was before. But longevity, workers' comp, we have some pretty big ticket items in all of the 100 lines. This one will have a relatively modest effect, and as we said, we have it covered in the non-union with about $60,000 to $70,000. Maybe it's 80, maybe it's 60. I can't remember exactly what it was. What is it, Kathy? Can you remember? I hate to put you on the spot.
I'm sorry.
You can't remember either? How much of this comes out of the general fund at this time? You know?
Oh, about 62,000.
62,000. See, she had the number right on her. We have worked on various permutations, so 60,000 of general fund funds are available for this purpose, is what we're doing here.
Member
Mr.
Sands.
President, just Member Bain touched on this, but what this ordinance in particular does is it makes the anniversary date of all employees January 1st, so that the people below the midpoint will, in effect, receive the 2% raise and their 3% step raise at the same time. So it'll be a 5% raise for those people in the lower range of salaries. So that's this ordinance. The next one,
That's what I said.
yeah. Okay.
Other comments on ordinance 145? Ordinance 14609 is an ordinance authorizing staffing levels, a non-union pay scale, and slotting for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2010, repealing all ordinances inconsistent therewith, and declaring an emergency. I have no idea who wishes to speak to that.
Mr. President, this is what we mentioned earlier. It's very interesting to look at the way it sets up. Just take a look at who's paid out of which fund. You can see relatively modest numbers across the board. Like the first page talks about the departments and the positions there and the full-time equivalents. And we get up to 169 at the end of the second page. Then you have the part-time people, which are relatively permissive, I guess you could say. If there's money, people can hire them, 2 interns, auditor, so on and so forth. And then the community center recreation. And then we get actually to the pay scale. And thanks to the auditor's office, especially Ray Hazlett, they actually went over and tried to straighten, to make it more comprehensible. Last time it was a little bit jumbled up, and Ray and Debbie worked together to sort it out. I don't think they gave themselves a salary increase, did you? No. Okay. I trusted her on that one. I didn't think she was going to do it, but you can see where the steps they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the midpoint. You can see how they go up about 3%, and then the max. And so those are changed with that 2% being added, then 3% to individuals between the mid and the max, and then people at the max are 1%. Okay? Clear as mud? Okay. The one other, one more thing I meant to mention, and you have management and appointed officials with they may be hired, there's some information there, I think that's already been there. But the most important thing is on the last page, and what we have is the effective 1/1/2010, police and fire captains, hourly rate of pay will always be at a minimum 5% above the lieutenants who report to them. We had a problem with compaction. Anybody who works in a large institution knows compaction is there. And the last page is slotting. Was that what you were going to say, Jim? Okay, so it's until someone repeals it, it's going to go up. And let's just say the captains got bigger increases than they would have because of that rule. They vary a bit, though. Okay, complicated? Not
Other
too.
comments? Okay. On to announcements and other business. The committee meetings the next time.
The city services, whatever it's called now, and committee of the whole, if somebody wants to, I don't want to lead that one, but Jim can if you want. Yeah. The one about the cameras, or do you want to wait a week, or
No, I can leave that one.
Oh, you're going to lead that one? Go ahead,
Sure.
then. All right.
I would like a finance committee that will discuss, hopefully,
More budget.
more budget stuff.
Budget.
We'll hope that we have enough information to put something together, certainly by the next regular session, but we'll talk about it next week.
Any others? Yeah,
Safety
Sharon.
Committee, Fire Department.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Possibly, if I can arrange to have the Soil and Water Conservation District here.
Oh,
And that would
it's
be-
probably going to be a long committee meeting. Can we go for the
It's looking
30th?
like
Yeah. Could we go for the
I can
30th
put
and
that
get
on.
all the people who are going to give reports to come that night?
Absolutely.
Okay. On to an opportunity for citizens to speak on any legislative items or city services that we did not cover on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone wishing to speak before council of the two visitors that we have tonight? Oh, come on, Mr. Goldsberry. Okay. Okay, thank you. The next item on our agenda is executive session to discuss litigation. There never seems to be a shortage of litigation before the city. It takes a roll call vote to go into, who all do we need? Law Director, I think you called this one, so I'll let you ask for it.
So I just want to request myself and then the mayor and auditor as well.
Okay. Okay.
Aye.
Sharon?
Hi.
Aye.
We will take about, when that clock says 25 after, I'll ask everyone to leave council, and when we come out of executive session, the only other item on our agenda is to adjourn. Thank you very much.